Computers in the Bitcoin network use a process called proof of work, POW, to validate transactions and secure the network. Proof of work is the Bitcoin blockchain's consensus mechanism. While proof of work was the first and is generally the most common type of consensus mechanism for cryptocurrencies that run on blockchains, there are others. Most notably proof of stake, POS, which tends to consume less overall computing power, and therefore less energy. Proof of work elevates certain network contributors to the role of validators, more commonly known as miners, only after they have proven their commitment to the network by dedicating an immense amount of computing power to discovering new blocks, a process that typically takes approximately 10 minutes. When a new block is discovered, the successful miner who found it through the mining process gets to fill it with 1 megabyte's worth of validated transactions. This new block is then added to the chain and everyone's copy of the ledger is updated to reflect the new data. In exchange for their efforts, the miner is allowed to keep any fees attached to the transactions they add, plus they're given an amount of newly minted Bitcoin. The new Bitcoin created and handed to successful miners is known as a block reward. All Bitcoin users have to pay a network fee each time they send a transaction, usually based on the size of it, before the payment can be queued for validation. Think of it like buying a stamp to post a letter. The goal when adding a transaction fee is to match or exceed the average fee paid by other network participants so your transaction is processed in a timely manner. Miners have to cover their own electricity and maintenance costs when running their machines all day to validate the Bitcoin network, so they prioritize transactions with the highest fees attached to make the most money possible when filling new blocks. You can view the average fees on the Bitcoin mempool, which can be likened to a waiting room where unconfirmed transactions are held until they are selected and added to the blockchain by miners. The Bitcoin network automatically releases newly minted Bitcoin to miners when they find and add new blocks to the blockchain. The total supply of Bitcoin has a cap of 21 million coins, meaning once the number of coins in circulation reaches 21 million, the protocol will stop minting new coins. In a way, Bitcoin mining doubles as both the transaction validation and the Bitcoin issuance process. Until all the coins are mined, then it will only function as the transaction validation process. Importantly, increasing the amount of computing power dedicated to Bitcoin mining will not mean more Bitcoins are mined. Miners with more computing power only increase their chances of being rewarded with the next block, so the amount of Bitcoin mined remains relatively stable over time. The Bitcoin network uses a coin distribution strategy known as Bitcoin halving that ensures the amount of Bitcoin distributed to miners reduces over time. By gradually decreasing the supply of new Bitcoin entering circulation, the idea is it will help support the asset's price, based on the fundamental principles of supply and demand. A Bitcoin halving, sometimes called a halvenings, happens every 210,000 blocks or roughly 4 years. When the Bitcoin protocol first launched in 2009, each successful miner received 50 Bitcoin, BTC, as a block reward. Fast forward to 2021. Block rewards are now 6.25 BTC, a reduction from 12.5 BTC prior to the Bitcoin halving in May 2020. The next halving is expected to take place sometime in 2024 and will see block rewards drop again to 3.125 BTC. This process will continue until eventually there are no more coins left to be mined. Today, there are over 18.7 million BTC in circulation, meaning there are just 2.25 million BTC left to enter circulation. However, taking into consideration the halving principle and other network factors like mining difficulty, it's estimated the last Bitcoin will be mined sometime around the year 2140. Bitcoin mining is a process that adds transactions to the blockchain and mints new Bitcoin. It involves solving complex mathematical problems using powerful, specialized computer hardware. There was a time in history when it was reasonable to mine Bitcoin from your own home, but as the computational hardware requirements have grown, most people entering the space will typically join a mining pool, which is a group of miners pooling resources for greater efficiency. Miners utilize hardware, often application-specific integrated circuits, ASICs, to solve these problems. This process is competitive. The first to solve the problem adds the next block to the blockchain and receives a Bitcoin reward. Bitcoin mining is not easy. It's extremely energy-intensive, leading to high electricity costs and substantial heat generation, so cooling solutions are a must-have for mining hardware. There's also a substantial upfront investment in equipment, and profitability isn't guaranteed due to the volatile nature of Bitcoin's price and the ever-increasing mining difficulty. Lastly, Regulatory scrutiny or bans in certain regions due to environmental or other concerns can pose challenges, so always check local laws before starting. Despite the risks, Bitcoin mining can be potentially profitable for those with the right setup and understanding of the risks. A Bitcoin wallet is a software program that runs on a computer or a dedicated device that provides the functionality required to secure, send and receive Bitcoin. Counterintuitively, the Bitcoin itself is not stored in a wallet. Instead, the wallet secures the cryptographic keys, essentially a very specialized type of password, that proves the ownership of a specific amount of Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. Anytime a Bitcoin transaction is executed, ownership of the Bitcoin transfers from the sender to the recipient, with the network designating the recipient's keys as the new password for accessing the Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses a system called public key cryptography, PKC, to preserve the integrity of its blockchain. Originally used to encrypt and decrypt messages, PKC is now commonly used on blockchains to secure transactions. This system allows only individuals with the right set of keys to access specific coins. There are two types of keys required to own and execute Bitcoin transactions, a private key and a public key. Both keys are strings of randomly generated alphanumeric characters used to encrypt and decrypt transactions. On the Bitcoin network, PKC implements one-way mathematical functions that are easy to solve in one way and almost impossible to reverse. The blockchain uses the one-way mathematical algorithm to create a public key from the private key. With this, it is practically impossible to regenerate the private key from the public key, meaning you'd better not lose your keys, or forget your password to access them. Also, you will receive a public address, which is simply the hashed or shorter form of your public key. This address functions similarly to a house address and is shared to receive Bitcoin. On the other hand, the private key must be kept hidden from prying eyes, just as your debit card's PIN is meant for your eyes alone. To execute transactions, you are required to use your private key and public key to encrypt and sign your Bitcoin transactions. Also, you have to include the public address of the recipient. With this, only the recipient with the right private key can unlock or claim the transferred Bitcoin.